All right, everybody, welcome to ASAP's member webinar on Georgetown's new portal, specifically for ASAP members and their Adaptation Clearinghouse. My name is Sasha Peterson. I'm the Managing Director of the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, and I'm excited to welcome Jessica Granis and Chris Coyle from Georgetown's Climate Center for this webinar. Just a brief overview of the webinar today. We're going to do a brief welcome. Then I'm going to hand the controls over to Jessica, and she'll do an overview of this new portal, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So please either take some notes or jot your questions into the chat box and be prepared to jump into the conversation after Jessica gives us the overview of the new portal. Before we jump into that, I just want to give a brief summary of ASAP. You're all members. We have 1,000 members across the US now, representing a variety of sectors and geographic areas and different focuses, working at local, regional, state, federal levels. It's a great resource to connect to your peers and get sneak peeks at new exciting adaptation resources like the one Georgetown is putting together. I do want to remind you, if you hadn't had an opportunity yet, to upgrade your membership. So we're primarily supported by the MacArthur and Kresge Foundations, but in an effort to remain sustainable as an organization, we are starting to charge some nominal member dues. And so you just need to go in and upgrade your membership in order to maintain access to all the resources, be able to see a recording of this webinar, and gather other information. You see here, if you're already a member, you can click on that Log In Now button in order to log in and then pick your membership level. And if you use the discount code Last Chance, when you do that, you get an additional 1 month free on your membership, so you won't be charged for the next month. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica to get this discussion started.
Hi, all. So I am Jessica Granis. I'm the Adaptation Program Manager for the Georgetown Climate Center, and with me here in my office is Chris Coyle, our Communications Director, and we also have on the line Kelly Cruz, one of our contractors, who is our lead on the Adaptation Clearinghouse and really helps us pull it all together. You have a lot of good voices in the room today. So today what I'm going to do is give you a sneak peek of a tool that we've been working on with Sasha and some other partners to better provide adaptation resources to the adaptation community. But just to give you an insight into our organization, in case you're not familiar with us, we were started in 2009 to serve as a resource to states and cities on climate and energy policy, and to help the federal agencies and government understand what innovations on climate policy were happening at the state and local level. On adaptation, we work directly with states and communities across the country on a variety of different legal and policy questions related to adapting to rising seas, urban heat islands, drought, and other impacts of climate change. As you may be familiar with, we also host the Adaptation Clearinghouse, which we launched in 2011. It includes a library of over 2,000 resources on adaptation, curated for state and local government practitioners and other folks working on adaptation. We provide detailed summaries of each resource and tagging to help users easily find the resources that are most helpful to them where they are in their adaptation process. And we're in the process of expanding and refining the clearinghouse to make it easier for users to find the best and most relevant resources to them. And we're leveraging the expertise of expert user groups like ASAP and the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. In making these changes to the clearinghouse, we have two main priorities. We want to first ensure that we're serving existing expert user groups like ASAP. And second, we want to leverage the expertise that these user groups bring to the community of practice and make sure that we're tapping into that knowledge and expertise to make the tool more usable for the community at large. So as you may all have seen, we've started this partnership with ASAP, and we've had this undertaking for the past year or so to try to align the delivery of what we do best here at the Georgetown Climate Center, which is looking at legal and policy issues related to adaptation and leveraging the network that ASAP brings of experts working in this space. When you all joined ASAP, part of your process was to identify your priority areas of interest, what sectors and impacts you are most interested in learning about. And so we have used that functionality to channel resources from the Adaptation Clearinghouse site to you in terms of emails and on the adaptation on the ASAP member site. But in the coming months, we're going to be rolling out network portals on the Adaptation Clearinghouse and creating a process whereby ASAP users can seamlessly access both their ASAP resources and information on the ASAP page, and also leverage the clearinghouse library that we've pulled together. As part of our expansion of the clearinghouse, we're going to be building portal pages for various important user groups like ASAP. And we've been working with Sasha to ensure that the portal page for ASAP users provides you with the best resources that are organized in categories that are useful to you all. When you sign up for ASAP, you're asked to provide your interest areas, and you already receive emails with new resources added to the clearinghouse based upon your expressed interests. And you'll be able to also interface with other ASAP users through the clearinghouse and see what other users are finding useful. The image you see here is a sneak peek of what the ASAP portal will look like. Users will be able to create an account, join a network of ASAP users in order to share resources. We also invite you to submit resources that you have authored or have found particularly valuable in your work if they're not already existing on the clearinghouse. And we're also to tap into the expertise of super users like yourself. We're developing a Netflix-like approach where we're asking users to rate resources that they find most useful. So you can use a star system between 1 and 5 stars to tell us what you think, what resources you think are most useful. The resources that receive the highest ratings in your network will be highlighted and featured first. And there will be a tab on the clearinghouse page for this network that I'm circling here with the mouse, popular resources, that will show you what members in the ASAP network think are the best resources for a variety of different adaptation topics. Working with an ASAP administrator, we're also going to think about how we can create tabs to organize these resources in a way that is most useful to the ASAP community. And we're going to be opening the call up for discussion later to talk about how we might organize, or what you think may be the most useful way to organize these pages. And we're going to create a system whereby these resources can also be linked to and highlighted on the ASAP page through RSS feeds and other ways of ensuring that these lists are also able to populate on the ASAP pages. In entering resources into the clearinghouse, we use a robust tagging system to narrow the list of relevant resources and allow users to narrow the list by impact, sector, geography, level of government, and other factors. And this robust tagging system will allow ASAP users to be able to narrow down the list of resources they're seeing in a way that gets them to the resources that are most relevant to the work that they're doing. But the real power of this new functionality is our partnership with expert groups like USDN and ASAP, because the universe of adaptation resources is growing exponentially every day, and it makes it hard, as you all are probably well too aware, it makes it really hard to keep up with this growing body of work. And this is even harder for state and local government practitioners that have multiple different job responsibilities to balance. But by leveraging ASAP users' expertise, we're hoping that we can really distill the most cutting edge and seminal resources on adaptation, really jumpstart the adaptation process for the community. And finally, with your help, we hope to build out a tool that we can sustain over the long term and help make sure that this resource is available for the broader community as the space continues to grow and we build our knowledge base. So some of the features that we're developing and that we can show on the ASAP portal pages and the ASAP website is information about member activity so that you can see what your peers are doing and what resources they're finding most useful in their work, what they're contributing to the site. So you can find that person that you think is really knowledgeable about a certain topic and see what they are finding most useful. And to that end, we're also creating functionality that will allow you to see other users in your network. So this would be our executive director's public-facing page, and you can, if she were a member of ASAP, when she's a member of ASAP, you can look at her page and see what she's found to be highly rated resources, what resources she's authored and submitted to the site. And there's also functionality for you to have your own profile page within the clearinghouse and feature the resources that you've authored, create lists of resources that you're finding useful and share those resources with your colleagues or other clearinghouse users. Chris, did you want to jump in here?
No, I think, when looking at both the portal pages and this, what we're really trying to do is build something that's very customizable that maximizes the ability of groups like ASAP to tell us, here's what's most important to us, and to make those connections. And when we go back and open up that conversation, we can look at how those pages are customizable, maybe in a little bit more detail. On this screen that we're looking at here, one of the things that we had talked about with Sasha was just, let's make sure, we do this now, people have a page where it's their profile in the clearinghouse. We're updating that with new functionality. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did for ASAP members was to make that connection back to the ASAP website and the profile that people were posting there, so that here we don't provide a lot of detailed information in terms of bios. We don't provide information in terms of what projects people are working on. So we wanted to make sure that people were viewing an ASAP members page, that they would see a link, and we're still fleshing out where that link will live, but to push them back to the ASAP member website so they could get more information there. And with everything we're doing, we're just trying to figure out how to make those interconnections, both unseen with data going back and forth between the two websites, but also in a very visible way with the important work that ASAP is doing.
And some other partnerships that we're also leveraging, we're working with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network to create similarly customized pages, but tailored specifically for local government users, which we're going to be launching around the same time frame as we're launching these ASAP tools. We're working with EPA to host their Climate Ready Water Utilities Toolbox and feature similar sectoral pages for water utilities and folks managing water supply around the country. We're also working with FHWA to write a series of case studies on adaptation in the transportation sector, and so we'll have sectoral pages on transportation and adaptation. And all of these will kind of also feed in and make more robust the discussions that are available to the ASAP pages, and we can cross-link to some of that additional work happening with other partners. Another project that we're working on is turning our adaptation toolkits, what some of you may be familiar with, that look at responses to specific impacts like sea level rise or urban heat. We're in the process of turning these into more online dynamic toolkits that can better reflect the rapid evolution of plans and projects and laws and policies that are being developed and implemented around the country as we speak. So these toolkits, again, will feature laws and policies of places where you're working, or communities that are involved in the adaptation network, and we're hoping that by leveraging these networks we can better reflect that work in the toolkits, and also have these toolkits inform some of the ASAP pages. So as I mentioned earlier, we have really two goals in terms of this partnership. We really want to make sure that these portal pages are as useful as possible to ASAP members, and then we also want to make sure that your expertise and all the knowledge that you bring to bear on these topics is used to inform the experience for other users, and to make this tool as useful to the community as possible. So in order to meet those goals, we are asking for your help, which is why we've convened you on this webinar today. We're hoping that we can get a small number of ASAP members who would be willing to serve as informal advisors as we build out and refine the ASAP portal. This would involve, a couple hours of your time over the next 3 months. And we would ask you to do things like review web design work and comment on the overall organization of the page. We may interview you to talk to us about particular resources that you think are helpful within the subject matter in which you work. And this may happen through phone calls or webinars or other media. And then we've also would like to open it up for discussion today to get your feedback. I know that we have Cake on the line, and one of the ways that we're also working to make the experience of clearinghouses more useful is trying to think about ways to better link up Cake to the clearinghouse and leverage the expertise that Cake brings in this space with what the Georgetown Climate Center brings, and make those connections also seamless and better connected. And then we also have created a survey. This is focused a lot on specific planning processes that local government and state government agencies go through. But if you have time, there's a link here to the form. It would take about 30 minutes if you answered all the questions. But we're really encouraging you to skip to those areas where you have subject matter expertise. So if you are a coastal person, rank the coastal resources. If you're a transportation expert, you can go to that section. And then we ask, if you're not familiar with a resource, not to rank it as not useful, but just to tell us that you're not familiar with it. And then we're hoping to use these surveys and the expertise that you bring to help us rank resources in the back end of our site and make some of those resources float to the top. And so the next steps is to email me or chime in on the phone today if you're interested in helping Sasha and the GCC team develop this portal. You can go to the link provided here if you want to participate in the survey. And if you have any other feedback on this project or the work that we're doing, there's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out frequently and often. But that's all I had to share. I don't know, Chris, if you had anything else that you...
Maybe just to help with the discussion, can you go back to the slides that were actually of the little portal view? So here, yeah, and this is fine. So when we say we're developing this portal, when you look at the top of your screen, you see things like an image, a heading, text that goes here that can expand much further. And right now it's gobbledygook, right? Because this is just a layout. But we'll be working with Sasha to figure out what goes where here. And then likewise, as you go down this page, while there's this popular resources sort of tab that Jessica was articulating, there's also the opportunity, as she mentioned, to break up the data in different ways. And so these headings over here and these tabs, you can have a significant number of these to figure out how to best break up the data and tap into filtering systems, a robust filtering system that can even be customized to create custom filters beyond what we have, both in terms of what the user interacts with, which is sort of shown on the right, but where the initial filter sets and what shows up on these pages and these tabs. And then there's these little promo boxes, and these are just links to maybe new reports that have come out or new things that are going on for ASAP members that need to be highlighted, so that if someone is on this page and they aren't already an ASAP member, there are lots of ways for us to sort of tease out the importance of ASAP and try to get that person involved in what's happening within the ASAP organization as well, and to push people in that direction. So those are sort of the sort of layout of what we're playing with here. But I think, as Jessica mentioned, really getting feedback and hearing from you directly would be great.
All right, thank you. Are you ready? Can we open it up for conversation then?
Yeah, and I'm going to put up this slide back up so people have the information.
Okay, great. I'm going to go through and unmute everybody, and if you will just mute yourselves on your side, if you're not talking, that'll limit potential feedback. While I'm doing that, I had one quick clarification. You said that the different portals will be coming out at the similar time frame. Did I miss what that time frame was? When are you aiming to have this available?
It will be this fall. We don't have a definitive date set yet, but think later fall, late October, November is most likely, Sasha. We're trying to wrap up development as quickly as possible, but as you know, sometimes those timelines aren't exact.
Right, so in time for Thanksgiving? We're thankful to have it?
Definitely, yeah, definitely by then.
Okay, great. And Shannon had a question. Can you sort as you're sorting by geographic location?
Yes.
Like where
So we have tagging by states and we have tagging by region. So if it's a regional resource, you can find it by the regional designation. If it's a state-specific resource, you can find it by state tag.
Okay, great. All right, if anybody on the line has a question, feel free to jump in, or if your mic is not working, please type in the question box, and then I'll be happy to ask those to Jessica and Chris. There are a couple questions while you're thinking about it. For asking it directly, there are a couple of questions that have been typed in. Shannon asked, when you were talking about the different rankings with different categories, do you have a process where you can categorize a document in multiple categories? Because what if it is ranked highly for one thing but not as highly for something else? Or how do you kind of filter that? Like if it's a planning document but it's also a good technical resource, or it's sea level rise and planning, do you tag it with both those things? How does that sort of work out?
Yeah, so the ratings are global. They're not going to reflect kind of what the resource type is or whether it's useful for a specific purpose. The way that the ratings will be tagged to another data point is if you're part of a network and your network is rating that resource highly, so it'll, ASAP users all rate a resource very highly, it'll come up as a popular resource for your network. Similarly with USDN, we're going to be able to figure out whether or not that resource is particularly useful for local government users. So we're trying to figure out, from an audience standpoint, what resources are most useful, but I don't know that we'll be able to get to the granularity of knowing that it's useful for one purpose and not another.
I think looking at the data slice between, as Jessica was mentioning, networks and sectors, I think that's sort of where we can break up the sort of popularity level, and so you could create a network in the system as we kind of move forward for multiple things, and this is sort of our starting place. And so if it was important, you had a group that was really needed to be at that level, then there's a way for us to do that, but don't think about this in terms of these bigger portal pages that Jessica was just articulating and sort of sector pages, and being able to look at what's popular within those views in addition to the overall views in the beginning.
Does that make sense? So we'll have different sector-specific pages for, you know, water, utilities, or transportation, and so the users within that transportation sector page that are ranking transportation resources highly will get a sense of, okay, so the transportation community thinks that these are the seminal best resources on transportation and adaptation. Similarly, on kind of local, we'll get a sense of what the local governments are finding most useful.
Right, so you kind of have a different lens on the resources depending on which of those areas you come in from.
Right.
Okay, great. Does anybody on the line have a question, comment, ideas, thoughts?
Hey, this is Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry. I'm using my computer's mic. First of all, this is awesome. I'm really excited about the launch and playing around with it. I'm particularly excited that the toolkits are moving into sort of a more interactive kind of format, because I think those publications are really awesome that Georgetown made. My question is about the different organizational options for the portal. I'm curious if you considered at all organizing resources by sort of stage or phase in an adaptation planning process. Let me know if you want me to speak more to that, but there's you know, the idea that sort of the process you use is fairly cyclical, and that you start with thinking about hazards, as you guys have already listed those out, and you move into a kind of assessment phase, and then you do implementation and come around and do some monitoring and evaluation. There's different cycles that are put out there. I'm curious if you considered at all using that as a way to parse out the publications or resources or tools that are going to be collected in the portal.
Yes, and I thank you for that feedback, and I think that's sort of what we'd also hoped for in this conversation, is to talk about some of the different ways to organize the information in a way that you guys think would be most useful. When we were initially developing the Adaptation Clearinghouse, we really tried to create a process-oriented way of organizing the resources, and, you know, to try to get to ground people where they were in the process. Like, if they were just starting, here's the seminal resources to get you started, and, you know, if you're at this process and you're looking at specific impacts, here is how we can package the information for you. And we've always really grappled and struggled with how to best present the information in that way, but that's, I think, why we have gone this route of trying to leverage the expertise of a much broader member network like ASAP to figure out, okay, what are those seminal resources? What are the resources that people are consistently citing as the best place to get started with? Because it was hard to do in our little bubble here at the Climate Center. We could say that we thought this was a good resource, but without it being ground truth through the community, it was hard to know with confidence that those were the best resources to start with. So that's what we're kind of hoping to tap with you all, is, you know, using your expertise and knowledge base to say, okay, can we as a community really come together and say, these are the best resources to get you started, and these are the best resources if you're at this stage in your process. So yes, we're thinking in that direction, but we need your help to figure out how best to do that.
Excellent. We have a question from Lisa. She was asking, and it kind of goes to Natalie's point about making the toolkits more interactive or more dynamic. Can you just explain a little bit more of your vision for that?
Sure. So I don't know if you're familiar with our toolkits as they stand in a hard copy publication, but the way that we've approached it in the past is to organize the toolkits based upon specific impacts. So if you're a state or community and you're really grappling with coastal impacts to sea level rise, what are the options available to you to respond, and looking at the range of state and local government powers that you have. So there are different regulatory options you have. There are different plans that you develop that you can integrate adaptation into. There are different tax incentives that you can use. and organizing it by kind of the choose your own adventure range of options that are available to you. To develop those toolkits, we looked at, not only what were state and local governments recommending in their plans and saying, okay, this is what we want to do and what we want to accomplish, but also actual implemented policies or projects that communities had adopted on the ground. And as you all know, I think our first toolkit came out in 2011, and just the world has so dramatically changed in terms of sea level rise policy since 2011 that it's just mind-blowing. And so rather than create a new publication that will become rapidly stale, again, we've decided to move to this more online dynamic platform where as these new policies are adopted or new laws are adopted, we can filter those into the clearinghouse in real time. And so you'll see, okay, for example, communities that are adopting floodplain regulations with an eye towards sea level rise. Okay, so here, Baltimore recently adopted the 500-year floodplain standard as their basis for regulating floodplains. That would come into the toolkit and be featured. So the design is to continue the organization and structure of the toolkits and help communities think about what are their options across their range of powers, and what how do you apply these tools, and what's your decision-making framework, but also give them the most cutting-edge real-world examples of where folks have implemented real actions on the ground. And that's going to be the Sea Level Rise Toolkit. We're going to turn that into an online toolkit. We have Sarah's Urban Heat Toolkit, which we're also converting, but we're going to also have 2 new toolkits. We're working on a toolkit for green infrastructure solutions to stormwater management, and one on municipal strategies for responding to drought. And those are on a bit of a longer time frame. We're going to be rolling those out through the end of this year, early next year.
Okay, great. Sounds like another opportunity for an ASAP webinar to show those off.
Yeah, and another opportunity for ASAP input. I mean, I think, again, what are those seminal best examples happening around the country? Because, we try to keep our eyes and ears open and try to keep alert to everything that's going on, but, it's hard to keep up with everything that folks are doing all around the country, which is heartening but also daunting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. All right, more opportunities for questions, thoughts, or comments from the group?
I just have some clarifying questions. So the resource itself will be public, right?
Yeah, so the way that we do it now is the resource itself is on whatever site it's featured on. So if it's a California adaptation strategy and it's on California state website, we link to that site for the resource, but then we digest the resource and say, okay, here is the most relevant, pertinent things about this resource for other adaptation practitioners, and do back-end tagging so that when you're looking for specific resources on specific topics, you can find the ones that are, okay, I'm looking for example, state-level plans. California's plan will pop up, if that makes sense.
Right. Sorry, I meant the directory itself, though, is public, but then you're linking it, you're just linking it with ASAP. ASAP stuff is private now, but the directory itself will be public.
So this is all kind of in the works. What we've created the functionality to do is to create open and closed networks within the Adaptation Clearinghouse. Because ASAP membership comes with a fee, we're trying to figure out what are the mechanics to have a portal that is available only to ASAP users, while also glean the information that you guys are contributing through interaction with this portal to better curate the Adaptation Clearinghouse for the broader community. So
Right.
there will be some features that will only be accessible to ASAP users that are logged in with their ASAP, password and such. But some of the information will be filtered out to the broader community. Like, for example, folks may want to see what are the popular resources for ASAP members. And so we could show them that, but this is still kind of all in the works and negotiation, but there may be things that we want to highlight for other users in the clearinghouse that may encourage them to join ASAP, but also kind of learn from you guys as the expert user network. But yes, a lot of it will be closed to your network and be things that are available to you as a member-based network.
That makes sense.
There will be admin options that you can kind of shoot, so the ASAP can decide, do I want this tab visible to just network members, or do I want it visible to everyone? And the network we're setting up with ASAP is you have to be a member of ASAP to be. It's not like you can just join it off the cuff off the Adaptation Clearinghouse site, which will be the case with other networks. Like Jessica showed, the local government network. If you're interested in local government issues, you can just immediately jump into that. But this portal is specifically for ASAP members, and as such, we push people to join ASAP if they're interested in seeing what those goodies are.
Right. A second question I have, I'm not that familiar with CakeX, but what would be the main differences of this with that?
So I have not actually been in the conversations about what Cake is doing with their kind of 2.0 version. So I'm not quite sure what their new functionality will serve. I mean, I think the traditional differentiation that we've somewhat talked about in the past is that we tend to focus on kind of the law and policy side of adaptation, whereas Cake tends to focus more on the biodiversity and habitats and natural systems side of adaptation. We have some blending in between, but in conversations with them, we're trying to talk about ways that we can better link between our resources. So if they have a case study of a process and we're featuring kind of the resource and have digested the resources on our site, that we can link to their case study and they can kind of pull in information from our library. But that also is still in the works. But just generally in terms of the universe, like we at the Climate Center, because we're based at a law school, tend to focus more on the legal and policy side of adaptation, infrastructure, built systems, and Cake has more focused on, in the past, natural systems.
Hey, Jessica, it's Alex. I'm just listening in for Jessica Hitt, which is our Cake expert and leader here. But yeah, our new, just to answer that a little bit, and thank you for saying it very nicely and clearly. The other thing Cake, I know, is starting to do is looking at specialized information through our dashboards. And we just started that process. Actually, not really. So we have the vulnerability assessment dashboard that we are releasing with, that we're releasing shortly in the next month or so. So again, it's specialized information that will basically, it's almost like a specific search parameter for all the information that we have in Cake. We have a couple other dashboards that will be coming out, like a fish one and a coastal marine spatial planning. Again, that specialized information that will, which it seems like this is very similar to what the ASAP portal will be, which is really exciting to see that you guys are working together. And hopefully there's a way to integrate Cake in this as well.
Great, thanks, Alex. Natalie, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was about this issue of audiences and understanding how. I'm just trying to get a sense. So you had mentioned that before, based on what people's the sectors that they represent or something like that, you might be able to see which resources are, you know, most highly recommended by folks in the transportation sector or something to that effect. But there's the private networks, and then are there public networks as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the only private network we have at this point in time would be ASAP. Most of the portal pages that we're working on and developing will be public-facing networks, and we don't have kind of as robust a partnership with other of these networks. So for the transportation network, for example, we don't necessarily have, you know, the membership network piece of that. We're populating and creating the pages and hope people will interface with them. But, you know, with ASAP, I think we are hoping that this can be a really dynamic start to a partnership, and we can start to test this model and see if it works. You know, one of the reasons why we're doing it in this way is we think that, you know, people they interact with sites and resources from their trusted community, and so, you know, with USDN, that's their trusted community for that group of local users. So creating this ability to feature and pull in content from the clearinghouse on the USDN site allows better access to that group and allows them to kind of interact with the information in a way that makes sense to them.
Right.
We're similarly hoping that with ASAP we can have a similar model and figure out whether it works.
Yeah, I think the thing that strikes me as the difficulty there is that the ASAP membership is quite diverse, whereas all the USDN members are sustainability directors in urban areas. ASAP membership is really, it's got folks that are specialists in hazard mitigation, and folks that are specialists in coastal management, and folks that are specialists in public health, and on, working in different sector, I should say different, you know, public versus private versus nonprofit versus academia, and so on. And so it would be really great to not only have what ASAP members recommend, but what ASAP members of a certain sectoral, you know, area might recommend, so that when I'm looking for maybe water utility resources, that I know that members of my trusted ASAP community who also specialize in that area recommend a given resource. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's a great point. So part of what we're trying to do with these sector pages as well, so we have different ways that we kind of slice and dice the information about what people are interested in, and just like through the ASAP portal, you sign up for these interest areas. We have something similar on the clearinghouse site, and one of the things that we've been talking about with Sasha is just how do we share data back and forth, as long as, you know, people, if they don't want to, they can always opt out, but how do we, you know, make sure that we know that information about people, so that, to your point, just because you're an ASAP member doesn't mean you can only look at the ASAP portal. There's all these other venues and sectors and things of that nature that you could say, yeah, I'm interested in this too, so that then you benefit from that more detailed view of the information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, can we tie a user's rating to their expertise and say, you know, within ASAP we have this pool of transportation experts, and Natalie is looking for, you know, that group's opinion on transportation resources. Is that a good restatement of your question, Natalie?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think because we'll have these different views, if you will, of the data, right? These sector pages that would get into transportation. Like, you could join that, just like you could join. You don't have to just be a member of one thing. You join and say, okay, I'm interested in transportation. Or you may have already indicated that on your ASAP interest areas, that you're interested in transportation resources. In which case, you would have access to that exact view. And then the other piece of this is how we're sharing information behind the scenes, back and forth with the ASAP website. So already, right, we filter our resources into ASAP. So if you've indicated you're interested in a particular thing and you're in your member dashboard, you'll already be seeing some of the new resources from the Climate Center, from the Adaptation Clearinghouse that filter in there. and we expect that that will continue, and that's sort of based on where your interest areas are. And then likewise, as we learn more information about what are the best resources in that area, we'll not only will you be able to go to those particular views on the Clearinghouse website, but that's information that we'll provide to Sasha and his team as well that could be incorporated into the ASAP pages. So we're not trying to assume that people will get the information in any one particular place, but we're trying to make it available in multiple places. And I'm sure we'll get smarter about how we do that as we go along. That's a great point.
Well, excellent. Thanks for the questions and the comments and the discussion. I feel like this is a good starting point to a longer conversation. This is your ASAP member digest, and so it has a summary of things, but if you come down here, these are new resources from some of our information partners like the Georgetown Climate Center, and so in this case, because it matches these interests, this particular resource that was recently added to the Georgetown site in June is pulled into your ASAP member profile, in this case my particular profile, but you can see those resources, and then it'll be interesting to see how, if clicking through here will then take us to the adaptation, the ASAP portal on the site, or how all those interactions happen. But it's going to happen a lot better with this collaboration, so I want to thank all the ASAP members for joining the conversation and being a part of it, and feel free to share with your colleagues. I think we want more people to participate in this conversation in order to make it as useful for both Georgetown and for ASAP as possible.